Okay, thank you. Uh, Today I want to talk about yet again talk about archival material and talk about two things. I'm going to talk about two things mainly. The first one is some clarification of information especially regarding the American Banknote Company and archival items. I just want to make things a little clearer than they perhaps have been. It's based on my understanding of the discussions that have gone on in previous presentations and that I've given, and also that Teddy has given. So let me start by the clarifications. I got five different areas that I just want to talk about. And the first one is index copy cards. So, I mean, we've seen these, we've talked about them, but there's some things you should know about them. That these copy cards don't just have proofs on them. They have all sorts of different things. In this case, from 1866 for an 1867 issue, they used they cut down a proof and pasted on it. That's pretty typical. But we also have for postal cards, and in this case, there was an envelope that's glued on, and inside it is a postal card with specimen and the foreign order number. And on the side, you can see a cut down trial color proof because the actual color that was issued in is that pinky red that you can see a little bit of the card sticking out. So here you have not only the issued item, but you also have a trial color proof. Uh, you can have stamped revenue paper included in those envelopes, and um, or in this case with Panama, you have a cut down die proof and the one of the specimen stamps attached to it. So you get two things on there. So these are all pre 1924. So you've got lots of different things you can see on these cards other than cut down proofs or cut down trial color proofs. You can have the actual thing attached to it. Now, with regards to the 19 pre 1924 cards, you need to understand that these cards were not produced at the same time as the material for which it's scribing was produced. These can be 60 years 60 years later. So that's one thing. The second thing you should remember is sometimes these countries made multiple orders of the same thing, but only one index copy card was produced for all of those um, orders. In particular, this is an example of a postal card from Chile, but this is not from the first order. It was from a much later order. I think this was actually looks like it was about uh, in the latter part of 1887. So the items on there were in these files that the American Banknote Company, and they just pulled out something. They didn't worry whether or not it was from the first order, second order, sixth order, whatever. They just took something out of that file. And so you if you know that there's multiple orders for that item, you should not assume for pre 1924 that it's from the first order. Now, when you get to after 1924, uh, you're exclusively for the that you're seeing cut down die proofs, and these are from would be from the first order because they would make these cards as they were going through the process of putting together their file, and so you can assume after 1924 that those are from the first order if there's multiple orders. So you do find cut down proofs, or in this case, you have the actual stamp on there. This is for Canada. Or you can find nothing on the cards, that there's no stamp because, as they say in pencil down at the bottom, no proof uh, found in file. So you can have nothing. So you've got these index copy cards, divide them into two time periods, 24 and later, you're going to find first order items on that. And then the pre 1924, you're going to find something that they pull out of the file. The file will have specimen sheets, it'll have proofs, it'll have all sorts of stuff on in the file. The next thing I just want to clarify between the American Banknote Company and the Hamilton Banknote Company is I, you have a really quick summary of the history of the American Banknote Company and who acquires whom, etc. The key is that American Banknote Company never acquires the Hamilton Bank Company nor its associated hardware. So all of those dies that were being sold is from the American Banknote Company. Yes, some of them were American banknote companies. Others were from Hamilton. None of the Hamiltons came together with American Banknote Company until sometime after 1990, when the United States Banknote Company acquires the International Banknote Company, which had been owning American Banknote Company since 68. So those two never joined until that time. So the sale that was claiming everything was American Banknote Company is just basically not true, because the American Banknote Company never acquired Hamilton Banknote Company's hardware at all. It wasn't until the American Banknote Company was acquired by a company that already owned the Hamilton hardware. So that's how they came together. And then we have these dated specimen sheets, which we've seen several examples for. This is an example from December 1903, and it's associated with the sixth order for these stamps. There was a total of 7 orders that Chile placed for these stamps. This is from the sixth order. They printed 20,000 sheets of 200, and it took place over a couple days. Unfortunately, the actual dates for when the printing took place were not in the print order book for this order. The 5th, the 7th, the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, and the 1st all have the dates for which they did the printing in this print order book. For those orders, it was just the 6th order. So I can't tell you when it is, but this December 1903 was put on this specimen sheet during the time of it being produced. And they also had set the counter for the sheet number to the 5 zeros, and uh, which also tells you that this was, you know, taken right off the press, and they hadn't started the counters going yet, because each of the different orders they did, it would uh, give an order sequence for these sheets. So that's not a plate number, but more a sequence number in the number of the things they ordered. So these are the kind of things that they would save in their file in the issue room. They keep that information there. So this was done contemporaneously with the actual production of the stamps for that sixth order. Oops. So we've mentioned PEMs and OAs, where PEMs are pre-engraving material and original art. And here are two dies that they used for uh, the source for the image they used in the 1911 Presidente issues of Chile. On the uh, on the one under PM, which is, you can see it's PM for C 346. So they're using die C14 as an example, and then they put these lines on the edge of it to show how much of that design they want to use for the stamp. So this die C14 wasn't used to print the things, but just used it as an engraving uh, image to for what the engraver should use for, and how much of that he should use when doing the actual die for the Presidente. And likewise, on the other side, instead of calling it a PEM, they call it OA, which stands for original art. And both of these busts are bigger than they need, so they have to re-engrave on a small size. And I can't tell you why one should be called a PM and one should be called an OA. I have no idea how they distinguish between them, because to me, they're the same. And if anybody has any ideas why one would be a OA and one would be a PM, I'd really like to have it here. So the last thing I'd like to talk about is archival material only exhibit. And there is discussion of how it gets transferred and lose points. And I would say that's not always true. For example, an exhibit on Chile Postal Stationery, just of the essays, proof specimens, and samples at China 2019, a full FIP show. It received a gold with 93 points and a special prize. So you can do fairly well with just archival material, or at least this is a counterexample uh, to that. So those are the clarifications I wanted to make. The next part is talking about archives, and then talking about different kinds of archival items than we've been talking about before. So archives can be found at non-governmental security printers. It can be at the government printing offices. It can be found at the post office department, and also engravers would have their own archives of their stuff, and fellow engravers that they would trade among themselves. And then the holdings may be at the museum. So some of the archives I've been familiar with is, for example, this is Robert Laubenheimer. He was an engraver and die sinker, and he did a lot of envelope dies for George F. Nesbitt and Company. For example, he did this 5 cent stamped envelope trial color for Argentina. He did the first couple issues of Argentina. He engraved those dies for George F. Nesbitt, and George F. Nesbitt had the was a subcontractor to American Banknote Company, or to go the other way, American Banknote Company subcontracted to George F. Nesbitt, and George F. Nesbitt then hired Laubenheimer to actually engrave the dies for that for those issues. Um, he also made a would make a file in some cases. These three things are the top cover, the sort of the middle cover, and the bottom cover of this file that's folded all together uh, for this chili proof uh, that he engraved for. Again, American Banknote Company had the order. They subcontracted to George F. Nesbitt, and George F. Nesbitt then hired Laubenheimer to engrave the dies. Another place you could find it that I had found was a very useful source was this Museum of American Finance in New York City. And those are some of the books that I found very useful, both the print order books at the top row, which were mainly dealing with engraved material, those print orders, and then the sales books, order books in the next row down. Unfortunately, now the books are in storage in boxes in Atlanta, inaccessible to any researcher. And when they will get out of storage, who knows? They had been in this nice facility in New York City, only in an upper story, they had a major water leak, and these were on the floors below it, and they've had to leave that area due to water damage to the building. And so they moved all the stuff eventually to storage. None of it was really damaged at all, including the stuff they had in their safes. But it's all in storage in boxes in Atlanta. So unfortunately, we don't won't have access until someday in the future, hopefully. So let's go beyond what we've seen in the past about essays, proofs, and specimens, and try to expand what other kind of archival items you have or variations on essays, proofs, and specimens. First, you can find tons of steel. Actually, I should say steel. There was 200 plus tons of dies, transfer rolls, and plates of stamps and currency and banknotes that were sold to some people, and they had it shipped in 22 semi trucks to where they stored it in this facility. And you can see some of it that's being stored in wooden boxes or plastic boxes. You can see transfer rollers, those are the circular things. And then you can see on the on one side these boxes with sort of yellow things above it. Well, those are dies that are inside of envelopes that tell you what's in those dies. So this is the source of the dies that were being sold through coin companies mainly, and sometimes through Harmer. So let's start off with this bicolor dye proof from Peru. We've seen these before, but what I want to talk about is you see those crosses, colored crosses on the left and right side of the stamp. Those are registration There's one that's in the rose color, and there's one in black of those uh, crosses, and those are used for registering the two dyes together. Excuse me, to make the dye color proof. But what's interesting to me is where the crosses meet. The paper from the dye, the India paper that the dye proof's printed on has actually been sort of cut and opened up. And I just can't figure out a good reason why you needed to do this. It wasn't that this is a composite where you say print the black and then you print another proof of the just the rose color, and you're going to glue them together, and you need to register them, so you need to uh you know cut one of the top proof, and so you can see to make the registration. I don't know why, and nobody has actually come up with a really good reason. Those registration marks, crosses are on the actual dies, but they don't have like it's not like they have a pin to get you to register the two dies together. It's just engraved crosses. So anybody having a good guess, I'd love to hear it. Next thing is A, B, and C almost exclusively, as far as I know, use the word specimen. However, on a on some occasions they did use the word muestra, and I have it on one Chile envelope that was never issued. Actually, they made about four of them, and that was as far as it went. Chile just didn't want it, and I've only seen it on that one Chile item for all of Chile. All the rest say specimen. But I did see a 1945 Costa Rica stamp. Actually, everything in the series has the usual uh, punch hole, but then does have that hand stamp. But that hand stamp is very different from what they were using in 1905. But so I can understand that. So maybe the things that were done in the 40s and later have consistently used Muestra, but I've really only seen them show up on Costa Rica. Now, here's a weird one. This is an 1883 postcard for Costa Rica, and it has a nice hand stamp on it of Nuestra. But these cards weren't produced by American Banknote. This is again another case of subcontracting. American Banknote Company subcontracted with a company called Major Camp Knapp, and they did the lithographing. So who added this Muestra? Did Major and Knapp do it? Did American Banknote Company, or did Costa Rica do it? I don't know, and would would really like to know who in the chain actually added the Muestra. Chile also produced some stamps for Costa Rica, uh, and they also used a hand stamp on it for that. So Costa Rica seems to be a favorite to have these Muestras on them. And these are all different than the ones that you can find frequently on Argentine postal cards. And those I I don't know much about other than they exist in fairly high quantities. So another archival item you can have are what I'll call genuine imitations. Uh, this was a post office circular about 1908 showing the different stamped envelopes and their sizes, and then down at the bottom is a chart on prices and all that. Now, all of these are not envelopes. I mean, they look like envelopes and they match what were issued as envelopes, but they're all printed on card stock. There's no flap on the back. There's just these front. It's printed on, and the indicia is not embossed at all. It's just pure um, typographic or lithographic printing. Now, sometimes these cutouts are sold as proofs, so you have to watch out. Now, this is one of my subjects of research has been these trial color proofs in sort of a brownish color for Hawaii on 1 cent. And I just look at them and I just can't believe they're a proof coming out of the American Banknote Company. Because if you look at the uh, green die proof that I have, it's so much sharper. Even in these reduced sizes, you can see things so much better. I mean, much clearer, and the this alleged trial proof just looks pretty crummy. Now, I happen to start taking a closer look, and there's this ship in the middle of the stamp, and uh, the green die proof clearly has a bow and a stern, where it looks like there's two bows in the trial color proof. There's also a break on the frame under the first U of Honolulu, and this outlined, and also the ornament at the right corner of the indicium is smushed in the trial color proof. And this just drove me batty for a while until this envelope showed up, which has the picture of the brown thing. And sure enough, all these trial colors appear to be people cutting out the the corner card. I mean, in fact, here's an example of a enlarged example of a bottom of one of these cutouts, and there's these color lot things at the bottom, and they match up with uh, the WG Weldon Jr. And so they just didn't cut it good enough to to confuse this, but these are not trial color proofs. So something to be aware of, that sometimes these proofs are not proofs, but something else. Uh, these are examples of trial color proofs for envelopes for Chile, where they tried out different colors of ink and they tried out different colors of paper, and sometimes simultaneously. So uh, that's just an example of what some real trial colors look like uh, for stationery. Then you have test runs where the printer would uh, make some test runs to see that everything was going right and checking things out. And in this case, they were using a new counter to count the number of envelopes that they had printed. And this was just a test run. And so they indicated it's something that you can occasionally find on postal stationery. This is, I guess, what I'll call an instructional specimen of a reply coupon. It's from a page. He was a counselor to the International Bureau of the UPU, this book that he produced. It's not one, it's on unwatermarked paper, unlike the issued stuff, and there's printing only on one side. And so you can see that on the top stamp, you have A parentheses, B parentheses, C parentheses, D parentheses, and then in the text they explain what should be in what will be printed in each of those boxes. So this is I'm calling it an instructional specimen. I don't know what else to call it, but clearly because this guy was an advisor to the International Bureau. He was able to get the printer to make these up for him. And then this is a real specimen of what was issued a couple years ago for Chile. And notice that Chile spelled with an I at the end instead of an E for Chile. Uh, Now we come to UPU specimens. And I use quotes around specimens in this case because these are samples that the countries would send to the UPU when they had new issues, and the UPU would then take all of those and send a number of them to the member countries. In this case, this is a page from the Saudi Arabia UPU quote, specimens book for Chile, for the page for Chile. Uh, Notice none of these have handprint that say specimen or anything on it. There's some at the bottom that have the word specimen perforated initial on it, but these are generally what people are calling UPU specimens, but I'll show you what I really mean by UPU specimens. Mauritania, when it received its copies from, it would hand stamp them Mauritania and specimen on it. Portugal would hand stamp Ultramar on them before forwarding them onto their colonies, and that's what's in really small print over highlighted by that red arrow. Now, these are what I'll really call UPU specimens. They are specimens exclusively made for being these UPU samples. These were perforated back either by the printer or the government before they left the country. And these are real specimens, and they say so. And these are only made for UPU samples. So there, there's a relative limited quantity because each country needed to send, depending on the time period, either 3 copies or 5 copies for every member of the UPU, including the UPU itself. A different form of UPU specimens than what I showed you are the same things that they would do with postal stationery. Now, this is copies kept by the International Bureau, and they would mark in pencil on it the circular number that went out with the stamps and stationery to the individual countries. So this was part kept by the UPU in their collection from a circular number 528.34 from 1900. So these are around. Uh, you'll you can find in some cases countries had sent over time multiple copies and more copies, even though they hadn't changed. Uh, and so you can find those around. This is a specimen, but you need to know Bulgarian to read that hand stamp, and it translates to the word specimen in Bulgarian. Uh, I don't, these were actually produced in St. Petersburg uh, for Bulgaria, and I don't know if the hand stamp was applied in Bulgaria or in St. Petersburg. But these, it's it's just specimen that's not in English. This is Waterloo and Company did an interesting with specimens. They, for their salesman samples, they would put these hands would print these hand stamps on it that said canceled specimen on it, and those seem to be say used by salesmen. Most of the copies that we know of today, there's one and a few cases, two examples known. So I don't know how many were produced, but they're pretty hard to find. They're known for Liberia, Uruguay. There's a number of cards uh, that have that stamp on it, specimen. And you can also find them on banknotes also. They would also use perforate specimen and Waterloos on it sometimes. That's one way. Or this one has specimens Waterloo and Sons Limited. Just a different way per, uh, to say that a specimen. This meaning of this H372 that's on the flap, nobody seems to have a good answer for what that refers to. Uh, it doesn't refer to the die number at all. H is not the paper size because some of these H's appear on envelopes, which are of a different size than these letter sheets. So don't know what the H stands for. Unfortunately, the Waterloo Study Group went out of business a few years back, and I wish they were around to answer some of these questions. They would also attach real stamps or proofs to these trade samples that they could hand out. The one under number 2 is a real stamp from revenue stamp, a consular stamp from Peru. I think everything. Oh, and then the Uruguayan stamp under number 8 is a stamp. All the rest seem to be proofs, cut down proofs on them. Bradbury and Wilkins made up fancy trade sample sheets, and they use cut down die proofs or trial color proofs, cut down trial color proofs. Like the 2 cent blue chili is for was used for letter cards, and they should be were issued in the Carmen color. And I don't know about the others, but these sample sheets aren't all they have the same general look, i.e., they have the printing down at the bottom and this sort of uh, eyebrow up at the top. But what stamps they use, uh, it's all up in, it all varies. And for example, uh, the stamp over on the right is a trial color. It's perforated specimen, though it's really hard to see, and it's down at across the centavos basically, and it's on cardstock, and then the backing card of all of the whole card was a card stock. And notice it has different uh, saying at the bottom than the full sheet. So they must have multiple layouts that they used. Then you can find, in some cases, die record books. This is a page from the National Banknote Company die, die record book. They have the die number under on pretty much all of these under the stamp. This is national, which if you remember, National Banknote Company and Continental Banknote Company all were amalgamated with the American Banknote Company. And so this was then held by the American Banknote Company. And in 1924, they went through this book and they put in these 5-digit red numbers in the 23 and 24,000 number series. Okay, when they did the renumbering, remember the renumbering that happened in 1924 where they took all dies on hand and renumbered them. So these have the original printed die number from the National Banknote Company. They have in pen the renumbered by the American Banknote Company 1924. And then there's these numbers that are in red and circle. And I'm assuming that those are the storage location for these dies. So if you, I don't know, go to box 76, you can find a number of these. Some of them are in box 77, the top two. One's in box 89. One looks like it's in box 108. So those, and notice you have one die with that sort of compass on it uh, that has no marking in red. And so I'm going to assume that that die was lost sometime between it being made and 1924, that it just didn't show up in the American Banknote Company when they did the renumbering. Other archival material is you can find meter essays. Um, the top one was essays made by the Universal Postal Frankers, and this is on regular paper. And these were essays that they produced for Chile, trying to convince Chile to go with meters. And then there's another one for 1931, another specimen. I don't know which company this represents at all, but again, it's an essay for Chile, marked specimen, and it's on cardstock as opposed to paper above. And then you can find proofs. So the Universal Postal Frankers had a machine called the Midget, and it could produce a, a date value stamp. And if you moved uh, the dies, you could get it to print a second one and a second in another operation, and you could keep producing these on in multiple operations. This CDM3 on there, that was how they identified who the user was. If you go between M up to I think 22, there's a listing of who did it, who owned it, who used it. And midget M3 was used by Alert and Company down in Chile, and it was the representative in Chile for the Universal Postal Frankers. So this came out of somebody's archive. I don't know whether it's from Alert and Company or whether it's came out of Universal Postal Frankers. I have a feeling it came out of Universal Postal Frankers archive. And then you can have this composite model. And they took this, started out by taking a large photo of the 2-cent postal card indicium, which is the base. And they cut out parts like the the part above Chile that has vertical lines in it, that's cut out. Where in the fancy flowers on each side of Correos, that stuff that looks white, that's actually cut out. They had cut out some other areas, which I don't remember. And then they took another um, photo of that had these vertical lines and put it behind. And so that's why that cutout at the top, right above Chile, is vertical because they inserted this vertical uh, image behind it. And then they glued on the value and the word for parcel card uh, on it. So this is how they made composite models, which they would then take and reproduce uh, as an actual indicium for parcel cards. Next one I want to talk about are make readies. Okay, there's this die, topograph die on the that you can see in a photograph. It's made out of copper. Okay, so it's pretty flexible, and it has four holes that you can see that was used to screw that card onto a wooden base. And then they would take a printing of it, and some of the words or printing would be not clear or clear, or they needed to raise it up. So what they would do would put paper between the wood and the die, working die, and then they would build up the sections to be so that they would be printed. And that's what is a make ready. And so this make ready that I show on the right was used for either the 2 or the 5. I don't remember which now. And it went between the working die and the wind base to raise the printing surface so you'd get a nice print all the way through. Like a lot of it looked like the frame needed some extra raising to be nice. This is an unusual one. This is uh, a stamped envelope that you want to see damaged. I mean, this is something that they can't take points away from it. It's intended to be damaged. It was trying to test the strength of the paper. In fact, you can see that it burst from that line that's on there, off center to the left a little bit. Pretty good line. And then there's all this embossing around for the thing that they use to uh, die that they use to test for the stamp to for the bursting of it. So, I mean, this is one of the few that I've ever seen. I've got burst tests for some revenue paper uh, but those are all that I've seen for burst tests. Very unusual. Bidder samples. In the US, the current contractor provided envelope and paper samples to prospective bidders for the next contract. So, in this case, this is a bidder sample for the 1915 1919 envelope contract, and they provided sample, as you can see from the text, A, B, C, D, and E. I didn't. I'm just only showing you sample A, and then they show. Then they also applied sheets, the different kinds of paper and paper color that that the prospective bidder was supposed to provide. So these are made by the current contractor and it went out to all of the prospective bidders for the next contract. This to me is one of the most unusual things I found for an archival item, a cremation certificate. In 1922, the American Banknote Company found 738 copies of a 1907 Chile 5-cent envelope in their stock room. They asked Chile if they wanted them. Chile said no. So American Banknote cremated them and produced a certificate that they could have in their files to show that they did cremate them. There was a number of other postal stationery items for Chile that uh, were of no use. The postal rates had changed so much that Chile didn't want them, and those also got certificates. So that's all that I have really at this point, and I'd like to open it up for questions. So
Thank you, Rose.
have at it.
Good stuff. Hey, Rose, I have a question about the index cards. Are
Sure.
they said index copy. Should I assume copy as a copy in the archive, or there was more than one?
Uh, I think it just should say, I mean, they had these index cards so they could go to them fast, and then they could get the die numbers and they could get all sorts of information from it.
Right.
So I just would look that saying that this belonged in this file of cards. I've seen some without that, and I don't know what those are supposed to be. They look exactly like the index copy cards. They don't say it. They have the same kind of typed information on it, but I don't know where those were used. Those seems to have come out. I mean, these index copy cards first came out in first sold in the initial American banknote archives by
Yeah.
Christie, and these other ones showed up 15 or more years later without saying copy card, and I don't know where those came from at all.
Yeah. No, thank you for that information because I recently found another index card which is actually a copy of one of the index cards that I have. But you're right, the sample in the middle is one stamp in one of them, and the one that I have is an actual proof. So, but the card itself, I'm gonna find it for you and show it. Both says index copy, so it got me confused because either they have a single point of reference or maybe there was a copy of the archive index somewhere else. I do not know.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
You know what the sad thing is? If in the early part of the 90s you had about $3 million, you could have bought the American Banknote
Yeah.
Company.
I,
That
I
was
solve
that
all
was
those questions at once.
yeah, you could have had tons of steel in your house. You could have it also included some spider presses so you could make your own die proofs. You could have all the correspondence files. You could have all these order books, plus all the uh, proofs, specimens, etc. that was still around.
Right. Well, just a matter of dollars.
Yeah, just a small matter of dollars. Yeah.
That's right. Mauricio.
Hi, Ross. Thank you for this nice presentation. Question regarding those archives at the Museum of American Finance. In order to take a look at them, do we need to make an appointment? Do they have a library that's always available? Can you tell us a little bit more about those archives?
Okay. So I found out about them in 1993. And at that time, they were in an office building and they had a couple rooms.
Mhm.
They were storing these boxes of those books in boxes in no particular order in hallway. After a number of years, and thinking, oh, at least probably about 6 years later, they finally moved into this former Bank of New York building, or at
Mhm.
least into the couple bottom floors of it. And there they had those books nicely on the shelves.
Yeah.
They had the correspondence files somewhere else in the building nicely organized. Everything was nicely organized. They had some work areas that you could go to. You needed to make an appointment, so they had somebody around to help you.
Let me see.
And you could do this. Now, I
Mhm.
was carrying those big ledger books that are about 3-4 inches in thickness, down up and down 3 flights of stairs, and those got pretty heavy. And then there was uh the flood, the water flood, and they moved out of there back into some office space. Most of the employees are working from home, uh, and all of the stuff is elsewhere. Some of the, some of it went up to especially the books, or regular books, went up to a library at a museum, a university in Massachusetts, which names I can't remember, but all of those print order books, etc., all went to this storage location in Atlanta, and you're just not able to get access to them, making an appointment or not. I've tried, and they just say no, they won't provide access to them. So sorry.
Okay. And the other question I had, what was that comment that you made about the Chile reply coupon?
Oh, it was
Because
just that they spelled
it
Chile.
is in French.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's in
but most of
French.
the other countries have their name in the way that they're the country.
Because I was just looking at some of the reply coupons. For example, the US coupons that I have seen, they're also spelled in French,
Okay, maybe
United
that's what
States.
they're
So,
doing now.
because in some, like for example, mine, it's the same way in French, in English, and Spanish. But other countries, they do have that different spelling. So that
Okay.
one, it's in French, but it's because that's the UPU's official language. But it's always nice to see those variants. I haven't seen one in another language, but it would be nice to see one just to have two types, especially on the
Yes.
same design. To have one in, let's say, in French and maybe one in Spanish. That'll be interesting to see if that exists.
Well, if you
So,
go back to the older ones,
mhm.
like either the Rome style, which were the first ones, or the London style, those you will find, like Germany will be Deutschland,
Oh, I see.
and etc. For other countries, you'll see it in their what they would call themselves.
Okay. And one final question regarding index cards. Any tips on how would be the best way to exhibit them? I ask this because they are extremely large, and the space for the actual proof is really small. Would you recommend showing the whole thing, or could we cover some part that is similar with something else because of space constraints? Any tips regarding that, or any one of the ones that are here present? Any advice on exhibiting those large index cards, especially the American banknote, because they're kind of half a page large, some of them. So yeah.
Yeah, they're large and they're
Mm-hmm.
wider than normal
Yeah.
uh, paper.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen some exhibitors that just use all of them for their
Yeah.
series. Hopefully, the series is not more than 5 or 6 stamps, and not like the Presidentes. I've got the
Mhm.
index card for those, and when they came out, I guess I would probably need 20 plus pages just for those, and
Mhm.
that just gets pretty boring.
Mhm.
So what I've done in my exhibit is just take one value,
Mhm.
have the index copy card, the die proof, large die proof, uh, and related stuff all for one value just to show the oh, and also the either the PM or the OA that goes with it,
Yeah.
all those together just to show the progression of the stamp and basically
Mm.
say this is how they do it for all of them,
Mhm.
and
Ah,
only show
for
one
one.
index copy card.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that.
And that's what I do because I just found having 20 of them together
Mhm.
and even just I mean also have the large die proofs, just the die proofs of all of them just as damn boring. And especially if you have the die proof, then the die proof, original die proof with the pencil of the renumbering and the
Mhm.
renumbered die proof, you put those all together, that starts to me to be boring and overwhelming. So I do it for one value and
Mhm.
try to get the point across with that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Ross, on that note, and this is more like a personal opinion because we had a previous conversation here, and some of the judges they were saying that anything that is post-production material basically has no room, no space in the exhibit. Now, quote unquote, the index card in a way, independently of what goes in the middle, is kind of post-production. So, in your personal opinion,
Only the pre 1924.
right, but they were the index card itself, the whole piece of paper was not made at the time that the production, right, was made after the
For
fact.
1920 at 19 for those after 1924, the answer is yes.
Okay,
So that's true for the pre 1924 are all done could potentially a long time after they
right.
were the thing stamp was produced, but the after 24 they were being done simultaneously.
Perfectly. So let's say for the classic material, the 19th century, those index card would be post-production material. So limited to that period, would you consider those have space in an exhibit, or you as a judge will give either a neutral opinion or a ding just because they are not part of the time?
Well, I would have them if you told me what was important about that index card.
Okay.
Like if you had that index card and it showed two different die numbers
Yes.
and explained that,
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
the other typewritten information about you, it can tell you that typewritten information can tell you about the plate size,
The engraver.
the engraver sometimes,
Yeah.
and perhaps other stuff you never know. The cards, they they typed on them what they knew at
Yeah.
that time, and or found records about. So if you explained those things, then I would definitely like to see them. But if you
Thank you.
just put
That
it in index copy cards and go on, uh,
yeah,
it's the
that's a
same
space filler.
yeah.
No, thank you for that information because it's how creative the exhibitor is with with that material just to, you know, take another aspect of the production even before or after. So that was a good thing. Cool.
I mean, the copy card, if you put it at the end of, you showed all the steps in the production and then put the copy card, then you can tie that back to all of that material
Right.
that uh that you just showed.
Right. It could be a good ending. You're right. It could be a good prologue if something need to be expanded from
I mean,
all the
you've got
pieces
die
that made
numbers
the
on it.
creation.
You got all sorts of good stuff on there.
Yeah, that's
And if the stuff is after 1903, you'll have the foreign order number on it,
that's
which you
right.
can then tie back to all of the specimens that have the foreign order number on them. Or, the marginal top marginal strips tended to have the foreign order number on it engraved.
Yep.
So
All that additional info. Cool.
so
Perfect.
so you get to so you can tie all of that stuff together.
No, definitely. Thank you for that. That's in some cases, I may have some of the index card and I don't have anything else, so at least one aspect can be displayed. But it will be ideal to have the full blown, so you have the whole life cycle of how that stamp saw the light. But that's a different story.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else?
To be around in shortly after the uh, American Banknote Company sale and just write a check to Brian.
Yeah, perfect. Anyone else? Any other question, comment? Teddy.
Hi, Rose. No questions. Just to say thank you very much for sharing your investigation, and I found your exposition very useful to clarify many things. Thank you very much, Rose.
Anytime, Teddy.
Mhm.
Great. If no other questions are out there, I don't see anyone else. Ross, thank you. This is very, very good to illustrate what can this material can be expanded with. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. I'm going to be down in Uruguay, so if anybody wants to talk more about archival material about any country, I really want to talk to you about that stuff. Because I can only afford so much, and so as a result, I tend to concentrate on Chile. But you know, I've been talking with Wilm about some stuff from Peru
Uh-huh.
and, and discussing some of that, and I need to understand more about Peru, more even just the stamps themselves, not even the archival more.
I know.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That's an interesting piece because when you talk about Chile and you talk Peru, there are some cross-reference that you need in order to understand each other. Otherwise, they live in a silo. I see exactly the same way, just looking at it from the other side. But the good thing is now that we can leverage virtuality, a lot of people have this kind of material. There is nothing that prevents us to create like a virtual library with all this stuff that it will be a good reference for all of us.
yeah, like I had a good conversation with a guy from, I think he was from Brazil at Essen. He had a lot of American banknote proofs, archival material in his exhibit, but he just was describing it really poorly or wrongly, especially the index copy cards, because he was dealing with some issues latter part of the 1800s, and he was saying these copy cards were produced at the same time.
Oh, okay. There was a little confusion there.
Right. And even though they had the two die numbers from the original, well, from the uh, second system and the third system on the cards, and I could sort of try to explain to him that, and all of a sudden that helped him understand what kind of material he had, and it also gave me some more reference material.
Absolutely. Definitely the case. Well, thank you for that. Y con that, el día de mañana.